on the state wire service to see if Boston will pick it up and go.
Not naturally so.
It's Virginia Poole. Oh, yes. Well, the way I became involved in Jaws was some of my friends knew that the movie was coming here, and they knew that I'd had a lot of experience in directing and in acting. So they thought I would be a good person to help the local casting director, Sherry Rhodes. And when they threw a big cocktail party and I was invited, I learned that I was going to be asked if I'd like to fulfill that position of the aide. And I certainly was, and it was marvelous. Janice and I actually worked together. We were both assistants to Sherry, and it was a good thing too, because we had a lot of people to see, to interview, to call up and ask to come and be in special scenes. So there was a lot of work from time to time in the office, and you really needed 3 people to field it.
Did your casting decisions have to meet the approval of Sherry Rhodes? Because they had to go through that?
Oh, yes, yes. She was delightful to work with because she got so excited about the project, and I assume she does that with everything that she does. She would be very effusive when we found somebody who was particularly good, and this happened many times, as in the case with Lee Fierro, Dr. Nevin, and Mr. Doobie, who was one of the selectmen in the town of Edgartown.
Ultimately, did Spielberg have the final say?
Yes, ultimately Spielberg did, but there's some interesting little stories that go along with that. Peggy Scott, who is no longer living, was a secretary in the movie to Roy Scheider. She's a large-built woman with a high voice that she used all the time. Well, I sent her upstairs to do an audition in front of Spielberg, stone cold. She hadn't done anything for Sherry or for us. Sherry was taking us on our word because of our experience in the community. Peggy sailed up the stairs to the audition room, sat down with Spielberg, was gone for half an hour, and Peggy's husband and I are sitting together waiting for her to come back from the audition. And there she was at the top of the stairs. She looked at us and said, "I got the part." And we said, "No, you didn't." "I did, I got the part." And we looked at each other, Sherry and I, and said, "Spielberg never does this." And this time he did, because Peggy Scott was such a wonderful secretary to Roy Scheider. They needed some pretty girls to be in the beach scene before the shark struck. And I was told to walk down the beach and find 3 or 4 of them. And it was a very easy task because young people who had grown up in Chilmark, where I live, were all together on a blanket, and every single one of them was great looking. So they got into the movie that way.
Okay, what about Herschel West? Were you responsible for casting him?
No, actually Sherry Rhodes was. We had gone to Menemsha Harbor to look around and see what might be there, and suddenly Herschel appeared with his little poodle. The poodle shows up, I think, in the finished product of Jaws. And he was thrilled with the job, and they were thrilled with him. And because he was such a, I don't know, just such a peppy spirit to have around, that they kept him for the entire shooting of the film. He started in March and he ended, I think, in September. But you can check that with him.
Okay, once your casting task was completed, did you stay along with the production in any other capacity?
Let's see. Janice and I would be called back into work in the later part of the movie. They planned to stay here and make the film in 6 or 7 weeks. And what happened was the temperatures were so cold in the Vineyard spring, and they needed to have people work on the water. And so when they got to September, they needed Janice and me again. And as a result of this movie, I didn't get any work. No, I don't think I got any work once that was shot. But I've certainly gotten a lot of mileage out of the experience. It was a wonderful thing to be able to do. And one of the things I loved about it was you could get to talk to the stars. And I had very badly wanted to talk to Spielberg. And I just couldn't find the moment until one day everybody else was talking, checking the camera lights, everything. And there was Steve sitting by the main camera and looking sort of available for a conversation. So I walked over to him and asked him about his movie. I think it's the Candyland Express or the Sugarland Express. It was his first movie to really be put on a national basis. And my husband and I had seen it, and we thought it was outstanding. And in that movie, you can see that part of Spielberg that produces something like Schindler. He knows the human heart. And Candyland Express expressed the heart of Texas.
Okay, and I'm assuming you met up also with the main actors, Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and so forth.
Yes.
And so, could you tell us a bit about how you were impressed by especially Robert Shaw?
Oh, yes, I watched Robert Shaw practice his lines for the town hall scene, and he went through the lines about 8 times. And he got a little cross with me because he knew I was watching him, but he carried on very well. Roy Scheider was great fun to talk to. He'd had a good experience in the legitimate theater, and his acting was so good that you'd think, that'll be in the picture, that'll be in the picture. Well, some things had to land on the floor, and one of them was this moment when the police chief is hurrying down to the beachfront because something has been sighted, and Roy, on camera, jumps into the car, whooshes down the driveway, screeches back to start heading in the proper direction, and as he goes forward, he makes this swerving motion, as men make when they're in a hurry. It was a terrific expression of the character that he was playing, and that was great. It was also fun to watch Lee Fierro. I don't know how much footage you've gotten of on her, but when she had just come to Martha's Vineyard and had given up her career in acting, and a bunch of us women sitting around her at dinner at the Black Dog said, "Come on, Lee, you have to be in this picture." And she said, "Oh, no, no, no." She said, "I have a lot to do." And, well, we sort of shamed her into it. And the day she played the part of Mrs. Kintner, I don't know if you're familiar with Mrs. Kintner, she was the woman whose little boy was on the life raft and the shark just got him off camera, but the image of that deserted little raft said so much. Well, Lee came to do the scene where Mrs. Kintner confronts the police chief saying, "You knew there was a shark out there, and you didn't tell us, and my little boy is gone." I don't remember the lines, but what I do remember was this, that she was so moving that the directors and the grips and the cameraman were transfixed, and when she finished, they applauded her performance. That was the only time that happened with that film, but all I can say is she really deserved it.
You spoke of the outtake with Roy Scheider swerving in his car. We're interested in that type of thing, like scenes that hit the cutting room floor and stuff like that. Do you happen to know of any others?
Oh, yes. Have you heard about the Posse? This was a part of the movie that was rather fun to shoot. It took us about 4 days, And there were many local people, I think probably about 30 or 40 local people down in the Edgartown Harbor with the Jaws crew. And this was a time when Janice Hull and I, the assistants to Sherry Rhodes, were asked to be in that part of the film. They wouldn't need us in the office because everybody was wrapped up in this scene where a posse of boatmen go after the shark. It was under the worst conditions. It was a cloudy day or a cloudy period of time. The sky was gray, the sea was gray, but still we were going forward with getting in those boats and zooming as fast as we could across the harbor. Well, the men who were in the power boats just had the most fun, you know, creating wakes and pretending that they were these macho hunters. I got assigned to the boat that was a little more, well, it was a little quieter. What I had to do, or what the people in our boat had to do, was to throw out the chum. And chum is fish that has been cut up in small pieces. It's no longer edible for human beings, but boy, it's great for sharks. And no one was making a move to pick up the chum except me. And then I suddenly realized that it was my husband who supplied Universal with the chum, and so my shipmates thought I got the dirty detail. So there are a lot of stories about the posse. They shot 4 days worth, and everybody locally wanted to see the rushes. And Spielberg invited some of us to come and see the rushes, which are, it's the first screening of all the shooting that has been done on that scene. And we knew that it wasn't going to make the entire movie. In fact, a lot of it is on the floor of Universal, or maybe they've even kept some of it. I don't know how that part of the movie industry works, but it was fun. So much fun.
Actually,
Yeah, we've
this on
seen-
tape.
They had to have the deleted scenes that are available on a Laserdisc on the upcoming DVD. So the whole scene is cut together on that.
So if you have a VCR, we could pop it in
Yeah, we
later on
actually
and
have
show
it
it
here
to
if you
you.
want to see it.
Yeah.
Are you actually visible doing this chum thing?
No, he was up to my elbows in this wet, clammy stuff and throwing it out for hours. And it didn't smell too good either. But at any rate, you can't see me there. You can see me in the town hall talking to another one of the townspeople. And I stand behind the tiger shark that Rick Dreyfuss is examining. Speaking of Rick Dreyfuss, have you heard anything about his getting a stand-in? No? I'll tell you this. You may or may not want to use it, but anyhow, Rick Dreyfuss was a very young man at that point, and he had met a young woman that he wanted to take out to dinner. So he spoke to Steve Spielberg about it, and Spielberg said, go up and ask Janice and Jini to find someone stand-in for you. And that was a pretty big challenge because we weren't using casting services from New York or from Boston from this. We were just two women scouts who knew the community. And so here we were at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, asked to find a stand-in for Dreyfuss. I was sitting at my desk, about ready to pull my hair, and in walked 2 newlyweds. And I looked at the guy and I said, do you know you're a dead ringer for Rick Dreyfuss? And he said, who's he? So we explained to him, and he said, oh, my wife and I would like to go out and see the film be made. Okay, I said, you can go and be the stand-in for Rick Dreyfuss, and Verna, either Shields or Fields, whatever her name is, as the editor of this film. She looked and she said, and you're newlyweds, so your wife is going to go out with you. And one of the grips said to me, if you try to tell that story to anybody, they'll say, only those things happen in the movies. My father-in-law, who was a fisherman of long standing, he was given the part of the harbor master, and it meant that he had to stand around all day long for some of the shoots. And he came every single day with his own gray and rusty lunchbox with a meat sandwich and lemonade inside. He didn't touch this extraordinary spread of cold meats, delicious breads, and oodles of good fruit. And there was no enticing him away from that lunchbox. And I wasn't jealous of him except for one thing. He always started out the day having a one-on-one conversation with Spielberg. And I was the one who was interested in movies and television and stage productions. And I never got invited to a conversation like that. So I finally said to my father-in-law, what is it that you and Steve Spielberg talk about every day? And he said, who's Steve Spielberg? And I said, you know the young man with the dungarees that have zippers all over the legs? He said, oh, daughter, I've been meaning to ask you, just what is his position with this movie? Yep.
Actually, you'll enjoy it because in the outtake you see him briefly. In one of the outtakes we have,
Eating a bowl of
he's eating Rice Krispies.
Oh, I didn't get to see
Never
that
seen
one.
that?
No.
Yeah.
Well, Sherry Rhodes was, in my estimation, a magician. She had the most beautiful smile and just the most understanding of people. I wouldn't ask my father-in-law to audition for the movie because I was afraid that he might feel he had to do it because I was one of the crew members. I explained this to Sherry, and she just patted me on the shoulder and she said, leave it to me. And about a half an hour later, she stopped at my father-in-law's boathouse and said to him, oh, Captain Poole, we'd just love to have you be in this picture. You are the essence of a fisherman, and it would add so much to the picture. She had him. As far as the red was concerned, Spielberg had certain places where he allowed it to be used in costume, and I think that was probably one of his visual cues to the fact that little boy Kintner was going to be gobbled up. And I know at one point in the movie I'm standing behind the tiger shark when Rick Dreyfuss is looking at the teeth, and I have on a red jacket, which I was allowed to wear, with my Jackie O sunglasses. We had costume people and assistant directors. There were 3 assistant directors who kept track of all of this. They were incredibly organized. And this is, I think, a measure of Spielberg's talent. Spielberg was able to make 4 and 5 takes on any scene that he wanted to shoot. And many directors would love to have that. But Universal had so much faith in what he was doing and what he was bringing out of the script and the actors that they allowed him to do more. And jeepers, I was witness to one of those scenes that had 4 or 5 takes. And he got all the actors together, Roy Scheider, Roy Scheider's wife, and Dreyfuss, and they actually improvised their way through a scene. How should we talk? How should we sit? All of those things they did together. And they said, well, let's go back a little bit, and why don't we have the police chief's wife get up and sit on his lap? And they did all these things that fit in so well with the characters. It was beautiful to see. And there is a scene where that happens. And that's how the movie was put together.
That's what I've been reading, is that it was really done on the fly, day by day. They're actually writing the script. I mean, and so I guess you were kept you were kept around because they'd probably invent characters. You know, maybe maybe we need some guy like this, so we're going to have to consult the casting people again. And, get more people.
Well, they called us in September when they knew, when they were wrapping things up. Janice and I both worked for them, but sort of on a we took it day by day as it came. And it was hard to give up, too. It was fun to be among those people and watch their routine. The whole island, with the exception of very few people, loved having the movie around. They learned so much, and the movie people were fun to talk to, and they made some money.
That's interesting because you always heard that the locals took exception, and they called it the Hollywood invasion or something, and they didn't like their presence here.
Oh, well, that's true of some people, but the overwhelming majority was, oh boy, look what we've got here. Let's see how this is done. One mother said to me, I'll be sitting on the beach with my kids for the first time and get paid money for it. Or, you know, the day that the shoot was done, with Quint in the old boat, and just setting all that up for the cameraman. And what happened was this: they were having trouble getting the shark to do what they wanted. And so Spielberg and Shaw are sitting there looking weary, and Dreyfuss gets up and he does a one-man comedy show right off the top of his head. No cameras were running. I'm sorry about that. He is a great stand-up comic. And it always made a hit with Spielberg.
So you actually saw the shark then?
Oh, I saw the shark in the boatyard. I saw the shark on the days they were carrying it around. And I saw the shark when I was playing in the water, acting in the water with the other extras. And there was a wooden fin that had been made and painted to look just like a shark fin. And the man who was head of properties stayed by Janice Hull and me, and he pulled that shark tail around, following us. And it was pretty convincing. It was really convincing. There was one incident that is an off-camera incident, and that's between my 6-year-old daughter and me. She was 6 at the time, and she wanted to be in the movies. So I signed her up to be in the beach scene. Well, they gave me the part of a mother running out of the sea, clasping her child. The shout has gone up, shark, 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 and we're running to shore. I was to trip, to lose grip of her, and another actor was to come in and grab her and carry her to shore. And my daughter did that for one take, and at 6 years old, she put her hands on her hips and said to me, "That is very scary work, and I'm quitting." And she did quit, but she asked if she could go and see the opening of Jaws, and I said, "You don't see that movie until you're 13 years old." And she did see it for the first time when she was 13 years old, and she said, "Mom, it did scare me. You were right." Every mother loves to hear their kids say that. But I'll tell you, it is one show, when it comes on television again, people all say, "Don't forget to see Jaws tonight." We were in this little crowded kitchen, and I didn't quite know what a stand-in did till I arrived at the house. And I stood for something like 2.5 or 3 hours to for the grips to get the cameras just right. And you know, it was a very interesting situation, but the thing that it said to me was, this is a good way to save the energy of your major actors and actresses by having stand-ins.
Kids are breaking my old fence.
So you've never seen this footage before, right?
No, no. I'm not sure. This probably was not in the script I had. That was the high point, I think, of Herschel's life, to be in that movie.
The scene showed up in some TV versions, but never in the real version.
They never put this in. Oh.
Never did. Any idea who that kid was?
Yes, that would be easy to find out. All we have to do is call Lorraine Clark, no relation to you. She would remember who the clarinetist is. Of course, that's my father-in-law. There's John Alley.
Oh, that was John Allen?
And there's Jeffrey Kramer, who is a vice president of 20th Century Fox.
So that's John Allen. Yeah, this one.
Oh, he's never eaten cornflakes in his life. I think that woman in the red jacket might have been me.
Holy Jesus, Kate Christ, look at this bunch of nuts. Look for trout fishing, clam digging, rabbit hunting, bass fishing, everything like he... Get that guy, kid!
Hey, wait a minute. You got permission for that? Yes, sir. All right, just a second.
That is Everett. That voice belongs to Craig Kingsbury. Oh, yes. You know, some of the guys got so into this that they figured out scenes for themselves. They would try and convince other people, oh, here we go, oh my God. That's exactly what I thought might happen.
You said 4 days, huh?
Oh, yes. And they had the best seasick medicine in the world. A little patch that you put on your wrist. Oh, yeah, that, Everett, where are you? That was, Anne McGee's brother. In the red kerchief. Here he is, here's Hank Scott. Yes, he was one of the ones who wanted to have this scene rerun because it had so many opportunities for excitement. Oh yeah, and somebody actually got so excited about fighting an innocent bystander got hit in the head.
Gun doesn't work. Cut.
Oh no.
Ah, fuck.
That definitely did not get it.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever see him play Henry VIII in A Man for All Seasons?
Been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just swallowing.
And that's it.
Oh.